And the fourth option, this is the one that I said would shock you, right? Because it happens most frequently, but people are like, I didn't know that actually happened. So welcome back to Keeping Your Business on Track. I'm Joe Harris, your host. I'm here with Nick Morgan today. How you doing, Nick?
I'm doing well, Joe. How are you?
I'm pretty darn good. Thanks for asking.
Awesome. Good to hear.
What are we talking about today?
Yeah, so I was doing some research this week, and a topic that I wanted to bring to you was overcoming low appraisals.
Low appraisals.
Low appraisals. And basically what that means is, you're under contract to purchase a property at a current price, and the appraisal comes in lower than that purchase price.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the first thing that comes to mind on this, the first thing that people should do, and there's really four things that they should do. And the last one might actually shock a lot of people out there. It's the most typical, but it might actually shock you what it is.
Right.
All right. So, but before any of that, the first piece of advice I would give to people is don't freak out.
Right.
Don't freak out. Don't panic. There's options. It's either going to work or it's not.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing that they need to do, or they can do, I'm sorry, not that they need to do. These are all options. They can do any of these things typically. But the first thing that they can do is walk away, right? They're going to say, look, the house, we were trying to buy it for, let's say, $500,000 and appraised at $480,000. We don't want to buy this house.
Yeah.
Right. Now that doesn't happen a lot, but it's definitely an option. Now you have to check with their contract to make sure that they can be under contract. And there's not penalties for backing out, and the time frames are all right.
Yep. But
they have to make sure that they're going to want to look at that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. If you are under contract, how does that work? And sometimes you'll see an appraisal contingency at the bottom,
right?
Or something along those lines.
Yeah, there's appraisal contingencies. There's provisions about appraisals in certain contracts. If it's a VA versus an FHA or a conventional, there could be different things in there as well. Right. And I don't want to go into too much detail on that. Every contract can be written a little bit differently, but just to know that is still an option as long as your contract will permit it, and maybe it will permit it, but there might be penalties.
Yeah, so but typically, most of the time, you'll have the option to just simply walk away.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, next, number two. And this, you're going to see these options are going to differ from whether you're in a buyer's market or a seller's market, right? Or a balanced market even. And so this next option is the buyer can bring the difference to closing.
Okay.
Bring the difference to closing. Depending on their financing, that difference might change, and it might not affect the loan at all because they might be putting so much down, but they have to bring the difference to closing to make the seller happy on the loan. And so that is still an option. They can bring the difference. And we see this more in a seller's market than we do in a buyer's market. Okay. But we still see it in both markets. Thirdly, the seller can just say, listen, I understand that we contracted at $500,000. I understand it appraised at $480,000, and maybe the buyer's not willing to move, and the seller comes down to that $480,000 purchase price. Okay. They match the appraised value.
Okay. And would that come in a way of them reducing the purchase price or seller credit, or how does that typically come in?
Well, that's a good question, because on finance transactions, for the loan to value, that's what you're borrowing versus what the house is worth. Right. They're going to go off the lesser of the appraised value or the purchase price. So whichever one is less, they're going to go off that. So typically a seller will lower the price, not necessarily offer a credit, because that doesn't change the purchase price.
Gotcha.
Offering a credit doesn't change the purchase price.
Right.
And the fourth option, this is the one that I said would shock you, right? Because it happens most frequently, but people are like, I didn't know that actually happened. You want to know what it is?
I do want to know.
Oh, okay, good.
I'm waiting.
Oh my gosh. And it's that the buyers and sellers, they come together and negotiate.
Yeah.
And then they find a solution that works for both of them.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And people are like, well, they both lose. Well, this isn't a zero-sum game. It's not, one doesn't have to, but it's look, one party says, look, I really want the house. The other party says, I really want to sell the house. Let's make this happen. Yeah. And we see this happen quite a bit in when the appraisals come in low. And so, I know that for someone to win, someone has to lose, but that's not the case. They both win. The buyer gets the house they want at a price that they believe is fair. The seller gets to sell their house at a price that they believe is fair. They wouldn't have sold it at that price. So it's a win-win. The transaction works out, and everyone lives happily ever after.
Yeah, I totally agree. Perfect happy ending. No, but it's just that makes sense though. That the two people, and it's think about it more of overcoming another obstacle in the process.
Sure.
And not like it's a lose-lose. Like the moment the appraisal comes in low, that it's a loss for everybody.
Yeah, it's not a loss.
I think that's yeah.
I think we see low appraisals, we don't see them a lot right now. And when we do see them, typically the buyers and sellers come to an agreement of some sort. One of those 3 out of those 4 options happen. We don't see the buyers walk away or the sellers cancel contracts a whole lot. We see the buyer and sellers look at the appraisal and they say, okay, I get it. This makes sense. It's a good appraisal. The sellers are like, well, shoot, if we put the house back on the market, are we just going to get the same appraisal again? Same type of appraisal, same value. If it's a good appraisal, there's not a lot to argue on either side, right?
Yeah.
So they have to say, well, I'm willing to buy it at that price or I'm willing to sell at that price.
I gotcha.
And that's what we see. They come together.
That's awesome.
About it. Yeah. Well, look, let's do a quick recap. So number 1, don't panic. Well, okay. Don't panic. Don't freak out. There's solutions here. You can walk away. If you're the buyer, you can bring the difference to closing. If you're the seller, you can come down to the appraised value, or you can do a combo of the second and third option, which is negotiate and work together and come to an agreement. And that's what we see the most.
Sweet.
That's it. That's all I got.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you answered everything. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Joe.
Cool. Look, if you found any value in this, hit the share button or subscribe to our podcast. Hit the like button. I'll put a comment down below. Let us know that you loved it or hated it. Let us know. That being said, if you have any questions about financing in general, don't be afraid to reach out. Our information is down in the description section, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.